Nobody could be any more honored than this. This is one of the absolute pinnacles for me ever.
10 careers, over 5 decades, thousands upon thousands of viewers, and only one man to face them all.
And now, the host of Tell Us Tonight, Steve Beverly.
Thank you very much. Everybody, and welcome once again to Head to Head. This week, the last of our high school semifinal matchups.
As here we go, and then there were two. Tonight, this is it. 1997 Trans-South Conference Championship game.
On Friday, April 23rd, broadcast journalism professor Steve Beverly was inducted into the Union University Sports Hall of Fame. One more achievement under his belt as he nears his retirement. After 28 years of teaching, news directing, and sportscasting, Beverly has left a lasting impact on the Union community and Jackson at large. To his students, he's known as Mr. B. On Sunday nights, he directs a weekly newscast on local Channel 39 called West Tennessee This Week, as well as a daily news show on Facebook called West Tennessee Today. These broadcasts give his students the opportunity to learn hands-on skills that will serve them throughout their careers.
When the news breaks out, we break in. West Tennessee Today.
On Saturday nights, Beverly becomes the beloved Mr. TV Classics on his program Steve Beverly's TV Classics. Here, Beverly shares his love for old television with the community. The program is enjoyed immensely by Beverly, and it is a project that he plans to continue after retirement.
And now, here's Mr. TV Classics himself, Steve Beverly.
Television has always played a huge role in Beverly's life. He has so much knowledge about classic TV shows, game shows, sports, and newscasts.
Even then, he was consumed by game shows and old TV shows and knew all the nuances and the trivia about it and all that.
Beverly grew up in the so-called TV generation. He can recall that at an early age he was fascinated by television. No one in his family was surprised that he would have an incredible career exploring the very thing he loved most, television.
But I don't think they were surprised at all, because of the fact that as I was growing up, I loved the broadcasters. I loved the people on television.
Steve has had a dozen lives. It seems like, we say cats have 9 lives. I think Steve has had 10 or 12.
How many different lives can one person live? Beverly has lived in many different places and followed his passions in many different directions. Yet he never ceases to miss an opportunity or to try a new hobby or even a new career path.
In the late 90s, was actually an internet guru. He would build websites, web pages from scratch.
A Waycross, Georgia native, Beverly began his career in broadcast, not with television, but with radio, when he became a play-by-play sportscaster in 1969. He was 15 years old.
I did 7 years of high school sports before I got into television. It went all the way back to when I was in the junior year of high school.
They go to Thornton, who puts it up. No, but Street is there, yes!
His first official job came in the year of 1976 when he worked as a reporter and a weekend anchor at WRBL in Columbus, Georgia. It was here that Beverly met one of his dearest and longest-standing colleagues, Phil Scoggins. They both applied for the same position at the studio.
So he beat me out for our first TV gig, and rightly so, because I've got to tell you, Steve was and still is a fine journalist.
After his time at WRBL, Beverly transferred to another Columbus station, WTVM, where he worked as an anchor, reporter, and produced until 1981. From 81 to 82, Beverly was the broadcast coordinator at Mississippi State University. During that time, he also hosted MSU Magazine on TV. His next career venture came in 1982 when he became the assistant news director at WSPA in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where he was well received by all, but especially by Pam Anderson, who was launching her broadcasting career at WSPA.
You know how it is when you meet someone and you immediately like them? Steve and I were just like that.
After his time in Spartanburg, Beverly headed back to Georgia in 1983, where he was the news director at WSAV in Savannah. It was here that Beverly met Sam Hall, a college friend who remembers Beverly's drive and ambition fondly.
Once Steve latched onto a story, he would do what he had to do to get that story, and it didn't matter if people might have gotten upset with him or whatever.
Dealing with the public is one aspect of his fields that Beverly became more and more familiar with as his career advanced. As his reputation grew, so did the number of people that would recognize him from television.
We would go to the mall or to a store or something, and people would recognize him and say, "Hey, Mr. Beverly, how are you doing?" And Steve would say, "Hi, how are you? It's good to see you." And we'd walk on, and I'd say, "Well, who is that?" He'd say, "I don't know."
Fame, even in small doses, has its ups and downs.
He was a local celebrity, so it was good. Sometimes I wished that we could be anonymous.
But knowing people and being known goes hand in hand with what it means to be Steve Beverly. One person who knows Beverly well is Stella Shelton, who worked with him at WWAY in Wilmington, North Carolina.
I've known him since the beginning of time. Well, maybe not that long, but since the 80s when he came as news director to a very small station in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Beverly stayed at WWAY from 1984 through 1987, when he then moved on to be the broadcast coordinator at Auburn University until 1990. After that, Beverly was offered a job at a small, struggling station in Jackson, Tennessee.
And I got to tell you, it was one of the worst 6 o'clock newscasts I had ever seen in my life. And I looked at Rebecca and I said, you know what? There's not much you could do to mess this one up.
The station was WBBJ, and the job was not easy. But ultimately, the job of news director at that particular station would lead Beverly into discovering his greatest job yet.
But if I hadn't taken that job, I would have never been at Union University, the best job I ever had.